Welcome back, CSC 235 to exercise 14. We're going to call this Database Web App, and this is really just a continuation of ex14 where we connected to our database on the back end using Python. I'm in my Python Anywhere browser right now, and I don't have any consoles open. If you do have any open, there's a little X by them. You could close them. You can go to the Consoles tab. Here I have this one open. I could close that up. You could reopen them again. It's no big deal. And if I go back to my files, you should have had a CSC 235 directory. And in there, you might have a text file if you put your console stuff in a text file. And you should have your SQL file. If you need one from me, let me know to actually populate if you had any problem with phpMyAdmin. And the SQL file looks like that. And I'll just hit back. And remember, if you make any changes, you have to hit save. And the last thing we did in ex13 was use this file. And this was basically code from W3 Schools that we just copied and pasted and put in our own information so we could connect. Because we have a host address, we have our username, we have our password. We're all using the same password. There's nothing secret here that we have to worry about or high security. And then also your database name is in here. Notice all this stuff is in quotes. All the SQL stuff is in quotes, including queries, which we started doing a query here. We first did select all from characters, and then we put in a filter, a where clause that we only looked at the gray ones, and we ran it, and it ran in the console. So this console down here is backend. So this is nothing for the regular web users to see. This is just making sure you can connect to it with this code. And we're going to take things a step further and use a web app to connect to this. So I'm going to go back to my files. So I'll just go here to Files. And let me go to Consoles. Yeah, let me close this up. That's what we just ran. Let me close that up. Remember, your file won't be open. If you go back to Files, that won't be open anymore. So it won't keep your tabs open. That's why sometimes you have to open multiple tabs. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to try to connect with a web app. Now, with the beginner free account, you only get one web app, meaning you get a custom URL like your username.pythonanywhere.com. And that will allow you to use a web app like Flask or something like that. And then you could display the web page, but you can only do one of them. I think before I said something like we couldn't do that, but we can. But we can only do one. So if you have another one, you have to delete it. And we're going to create one right here. And if you pay for an account, you could pay $12 a month or something, and you could get more web apps. You could customize an account. But for now, don't worry about any of that. We're going to go to web. So on the dashboard, it's called Web Apps, open Web tab, or you could just go here to Web. And right now it says you have no web apps. And what I'm going to do is add a new web app. So you just have to hit this button, and it says your web app's domain name. So with the free account, you can't use a custom domain name. It's just going to use your username. So that's all you have to do. So don't worry about any of this. Just hit Next. And then what we'll do is we'll use Flask, because we're somewhat familiar with Flask a little bit. And that works well with Python, so we're going to work with that. I haven't worked with Bottle or Web2Py or Django, so I'm going to work with Flask. So I'm just going to click on Flask here. It doesn't look like a link, but it is. So click on Flask, and you can choose Python 3.8. They have a console for Python 3.8. I'll just stick with that for now, Python 3.8. And what happens here is it creates a new Flask project, and it tells you to use My Site. Well, I don't want to use My Site. I don't want it to create a new folder. I'm going to use the folder I have. So I'm going to go here and put CSC 235. And you could leave this file right now because you're going to have a main py file, but let it create this one because this is its sample file that it's going to use. So use that for now, but make sure that you indicate your folder because that's where you want to put it in this CSC 235 folder. If you have it, hopefully you have it. And if not, it would make a My Site folder or something. So hit Next. I don't know what that thing is. That must be the Flask icon. I don't know what that is. Let me know in comments what that thing is if you know. Anyway, I'm going to hit Next, and it's creating my web app, and it'll give me a URL to work with, and that's my URL, and it's going to be username.pythonanywhere.com, and you only get one of them, and it can run until 3 months from today. You could click that button if you want. And you can reload it. If you make any changes or anything, you could reload it here. But where you actually get to it is here. This is the link. So when you go here, it'll say hello from Flask. Now, one thing I just want to point out, I'm going to hit back. I'm going to go back here. Just make sure that this thing says CSC 235 here, because I tried changing it and making a new folder, and I didn't realize that you had to change these things down here. I had just changed it here, and I thought everything was okay because I put in a new folder name, but if you do change the folder or do something different, you have to go down here. Make sure that it's using this directory. I think the working directory can just stay like that. It can just stay with your main username, but make sure that this is your CSC 235 or a different folder if you end up using a different folder. You don't have to mess with this WSGI configuration file, and you shouldn't have to do anything else. So just make sure that this matches up to what you're doing if you do make any changes. So you shouldn't have to do anything else. If you have errors, you can check down here. But right now, it's working. And how do I know it's working? Because I went to here. Remember, this is the link. Go to here, and it should open it in a new tab. If not, just right-click and say Open a New Tab. Not that you need to go back here for whatever reason, but at least here, then you could go to your files and different things, and you could keep this open, just like we do in Replit. So this says Hello from Flask. So just to make sure this is working. Now I'm going to right-click here and inspect. And you can see it just has body, it just has basic HTML in here. Now we did not create this, so let's see where that is. So we did not create it, it created it, but we're going to put in our own code in there, our HTML code and Flask code to work with. So I'm going to go back to Web App, and I'm just going to go to Files right now, and we could come back here at any time. And I'm going to go into my CSC 235 folder, and there's that Flask app. This was created by the web app. So we had our main py, it made a Flask app.py, and here's where it imports Flask. So it does the import for you, and we didn't have to install it. Sometimes they say just like the PIP you have to install it, but it looks like it works. It was built in, so it works. So if you get any error with it, you might have to install Flask, but it seemed to work okay. It's saying hello from Flask. So if you just want to make sure that it's working okay, you can just go here and say, you know, this is from CSC 235 fall 23. Anything like that. Just any change to put in here into the string that's being returned, just to test that it's working. Now remember, this is doing a root, so it's making an index page right here. Now you don't have to run this here because we're not really running any console work, but you can do save. You want to save it. And then you want to make sure that when you come here and you refresh it, this is changing, just to make sure it's working okay. And it's not. So that's okay, because I discovered this, that just refreshing the page doesn't change it. You remember how we had to run our file? Well, we don't have to run it necessarily. Well, actually, maybe we can run it. One of the things I saw was that if we went here to our web app, and I'll open it up in a new tab, you have to actually reload it from here. Reloading it is different than just refreshing it here. Refreshing it doesn't seem to work completely. You have to reload it. But before I do that, I didn't realize that now I'm thinking, oh, well, we had to run it in Replit. Let's run it here and then refresh it and see if that works, because then you don't have to go and do that reload thing. So we made a change here. We saved it. And let's just run it. Okay, and we don't even have to worry about what's happening down here. We should be able to just go here, and now it should refresh. And maybe it's not done. Maybe it's not done running. Did that work? It didn't. All right, so I'm kind of testing this on the fly here. So what I recommend, if anything isn't updating, go back to your web app and just reload with this green button. Now, I don't know why that's different than refreshing, but that seems to reload it with your updated code. Now, if I come here and refresh, now it's updating. Okay, so what we learned here is don't bother hitting run, because it really doesn't do anything other than open up the interpreter here. So running doesn't help. Saving, you need to save it, but before you make any changes, you make sure you go here and you reload it from here. And then you still have to refresh it here, but that's just one little kind of thing we have to worry about when we do that. Okay, so it's working. So what we're going to do next is try and connect to our database. So we're going to be doing that next in part 2 of ex14.